in all of this, the elections then fail on a massive scale. Especially the presidential elections failed on a massive scale. So there's a lot of issues that are being canvassed before the election petition, the election tribunals, right? And especially in the presidential elections. So I think that it's a betrayal of Nigerians and a betrayal of the principles of civil liberty, of political, democratic transparency and accountability, that our judges, the judges hearing these petitions, chose to hear them, not in the most open of forums, not televised, but to hear them, in a sense, secretly. Of course, Nigerians get snippets from different media organizations about what transpired every day in the tribunals. But it would have given great fillip, great hope to Nigerians if they were able to see the entire process. So that at the end of the day, whatever verdict the tribunal came to, in a sense that the public will have the confidence that that verdict reflected what transpired during the hearings, right? And it has nothing to do with whether one candidate or another candidate triumphs, whether Peter Obi's petition succeeds and, they announce him as the proper president-elect, or Tinubu is ultimately affirmed as a president, or Atiku, or there is a call for supplementary elections, or a call for the cancellation of elections, whatever the verdict, the ultimate verdict is. If Nigerians feel that something has happened outside of their purview, that the process has been hidden from them, then already, again, we have failed in what was a great opportunity to, and also it's interesting, by the way, that INEC and the APC and Tinubu, the ostensible winners and organizers of this election that they want to tell us was in compliance with the Electoral Commission, that they all teamed up to insist that they did not want a televised election. So you say, what are they hiding? Because if I were the INEC leader and I was sure that I called the correct election, I would ask for CNN or the BBC to come and beam the hearings so that they can see us acquit ourselves and earn our image back from those who are traducing our image. But so these are the ones who say, yeah, we acted correctly, but we don't want the public to see us struggle or to see us triumph in upholding that self-image. So,
yeah. Well, so now we're talking about we moved on to the outcome. So the tribunals, about the tribunals and all that. First thing I would say is the one good one about the positive thing of one of the positive things of this week was the Sierra Leonean elections happened, and I always I don't know whether to laugh or send out letters and emails warning the countries when I see Nigerian officials going to monitor their elections. I'm like, look, man, you need to get these guys out of your country. So people were not happy with the elections. Obviously, people are typically not always happy with elections. Question is to what degree. And in some cases, like in the case of Nigeria, was there even any election really? So there's nothing to be. There was an event, but it wasn't an election in the case of Nigeria. But they showed certain things. The people showed. Even the organization was way better. The basic stuff, just printing papers, pictures. There's things here and there. I have a couple of people I've worked with and friends who are Sierra Leoneans who actually live here and went there to vote or went there to be part of the movement, right? So I followed them on social media because they're friends to some degree, right? So, people had complaints here and there. Nothing compared to Nigeria. And the Electoral Commissioner came out and said, hey, if you guys are not happy, look at what happened in Nigeria. Look at Peter Obi.
Yeah.
Specifically, that was a bright spot to say, look at Peter Obi. And I'd said this all through when people keep on insulting the Obi. I said, look, you can't control your support. You can barely even, some people can barely even control their own families, much less supporters, right? So you can't control what people do. Your biggest control maybe is your family. Maybe it's people around you to some degree. You can't control that. But to use that in the Nigerian fashion, the violence fashion, as they spell it, violence fashion, and say it was Peter Obi, I'm like, you're just being very unfair is the kindest thing I'll say to that person, because obviously a lot of them were beyond unfair. But you see other countries looking back and like, they're not even saying, hey, go to court like Kenya. No, they're like, hey, look, see what happened in Nigeria? See, Peter Obi could have ignited his supporters, and God knows where we would be today if he had done that. Yeah. But he chose the path which he has from day one campaigned on. He cares about where Nigeria goes to. He believes in Nigeria, has one passport, all that stuff. He's traveled around the world, all that good stuff. And then go to court, follow the distance. And that was a bright spot about it. That was a good spot to see, like, okay, hey, look, even other countries that are taking consuming all these things from Nigeria, are sitting down. Mind you, Sierra Leone has a massive both religious divide, cultural divide,
class divide.
You have all these divides of different kinds. You have just like you have Liberia, same thing with Sierra Leone. I've forgotten what they're called in Sierra Leone. The transplants. We don't really call them as much in Nigeria because the transplants, I mean, by the way, are not modern day transplants. Yeah, Sierra Leone is a country that was created by the British to deal with the aftermath, essentially dealing with the aftermath first of the Revolutionary War, and then eventually their own abolition of slave trading. Before slavery, but slave trading. So it's a country that was created. Same thing with Liberia, was also created to deal with the aftermath of both the American Revolutionary War and the American Civil War. When you get to the tribunals and you look at what's going on, the cases, and I don't know how it ends up.
My point is that even if, let's say, Peter Obi wins in court, and the court, in the best case scenario, declares that he won the elections, or the court decide, okay, he didn't quite win, he came the closest to winning, because I believe from everything that Obi had the most votes, most likely, so that it was absurd to place him at third. But let's say that he had the most votes, but he did not meet the threshold somehow for victory, right? So the tribunal could say, okay, you go for another election. I actually think that if there is another election, that Obi is likely not to do well, principally because the pool of his supporters, ethnicity and sectarian sentiments have poisoned that pool. So some people now feel that there is a war between Igbo people and Yoruba people. There is a war between Muslims and Christians and so on, Catholics and Pentecostals, which is a sort of divisions or divisiveness that Nigeria is a genius at trumping and trumping up. But what I'm saying is that even if Obi wins, right, there are Tinubu supporters who will now feel, Obi must have, somebody must hate Tinubu because he's a Muslim or he's a Yoruba man, and they went and they want to push him out, right? But if the hearings were out in the open, because the tribunals, hopefully, if they are sworn to the defense of the law, then they should have no fears, okay? People will see the evidence. And the truth is that we have to give ordinary people more credit than they usually get. Even though people are not lawyers, when they look at proceedings in a courtroom over several days, over several weeks, they can have a sense of which party is making a compelling case and which is making a weak case, right? It struck me that many of the witnesses that have testified for either the PDP or the Labour Party, that the defendants have had to resort to very sort of tangential technical questions. So there was this cybersecurity guy who testified for the Labour Party, and the Tinubu's lawyer was asking, who is the boss of your agencies? Did your boss give you permission to come? And so on and so forth. So, you already see this is a lawyer who is struggling, because you cannot impugn the evidence that this person has presented. And so you resort to technicalities. Did your boss write you a letter? Did he approve your presence here through a circular or by, verbal means and so on? So that's one, the loss already, that whoever emerges victorious, and let us say that somehow, let's say that Tinubu is affirmed, which a lot of people think that that's the way these cases go. In Nigeria, that whatever happens, even when there is abundant merit to the petitions, that the Nigerian judiciary has never had the spine. And I really hope that at some point they develop that spine, they grow the spine, right? To remove an illegitimate government at the federal level. They've done that at the state level. And I think that was either the first case or one of the first cases when they removed Ngige, right? In Anambra State.
It was the first case.
Yeah. So, and before then, it was almost like once you rigged yourself in, it became a fait accompli, first of all, because you had all these resources of the state at your disposal. And so you can buy the best lawyers. And if you came to bribing, you could offer the most handsome bribes, right? To panels of judges and so on. Now, we have never had a federal election. A presidential election invalidated by the courts. But this one was so egregious, so blatant, so flagrant that, and there have been very bad ones in the past. But this one particularly, I think, crossed a line. So that if the panel were to ignore all of that and just say, we're going to affirm Tinubu as president, I think that you are going to see one of two things. It's either that future elections will be more violent because everybody knows that whatever we do, once we get in there, basically will cost to 4 years, right? So it will either be more violent, instigated by the candidates to intimidate their opponents and win, or there will be instant recourse to violence by losing candidates would instigate violence because they know if we go to court, there's not going to be a recourse, right? So there is a solution. And that solution, I think, is to have the elections in Nigeria much earlier so that we resolve the question of any questions about electoral disputes must be resolved before a new president is installed. The way that Yakubu, conducted the elections is you have to have zero respect for your name, for your legacy, to put your name behind this kind of election and to announce it the way he did, right? But having said so, if again we inhabit a world where people demand proof. So all I'm saying is that if somebody says to us, okay, show proof, right? We have no proof. But all we can say is that it doesn't pass the smell test. You have to hate your name and yourself so much to call the kind of election that he did. So
yeah, in a decent country, if somebody says show proof, based on what people have brought out, based on the recordings, based on the information, based on everything, in any half-working country, there would have been a serious investigation.
Oh, in any half-working country, yeah.
I'm not even talking of America. I'm talking of countries that you might not even, small countries here and there. So there's enough for a full-scale investigation.
Yeah.
When people, the mischievous people that will say show proof, are trying to say, well, show a conviction. In Nigeria, there will not be an investigation.